Amen. All right. Good morning and welcome. The treats are here. If you need to get up and grab a treat, feel free. I'm not going to treat it like a class. You don't have to raise your hand and ask permission. You have permission. Not at all. Even if you're eating like 5 muffins at once, I won't make fun of you. you know. No fingers. All right, so week 3. Woo! Finance. I applaud you all for sticking with it. We've had mostly the same group the whole time. I'm very impressed. And this is, again, part 3 of 6. To be determined when we're doing parts 4, 5, and 6. I need to check with a few of the powers that be as far as when we're going to get to do that. But as just a reminder, 4, 5, and 6 will be all about investing and generosity. What we've been going through so far, week 1 was the theology and philosophy of resource management. And then both last week and today, we're talking about budgeting. Now, budgeting, as we defined last week, in simple terms, is telling your money and other resources where to go rather than wondering where they went. And so it's just taking some deliberate steps to be intentional about the direction that we're going and the trajectory of our lives. A few months back, I was reflecting on the subject of discipline and just journaled out a few ideas that can be helpful, but may also feel like they've got a little bit of a sting in them. So I'll read the quote and then do a brief explanation. And I said, it's not really a question of whether we're disciplined or not, because every person is disciplined in every area of their life. It's not a question of if you're disciplined, but rather what you're disciplining yourself to do. I figured, how real is that? Even using health or fitness as an example, well, it's not that one person is really disciplined because they exercise and they diet and they go hiking or whatever it is, and that this other person that's sitting around and eating Doritos and watching TV isn't. Well, they're training. They're disciplined. They're disciplining their body and telling it to adapt to what does it need to be capable of doing. I'm telling my body it needs to be capable of storing this energy for maybe a future use. And so it's not really a question of if we're disciplined, but how we're disciplining ourselves. We talked very briefly last week about neural pathways and how a lot of the times when we're trying to establish a new set of habits or a new neural pathway, if you will, a lot of the times it feels like we're running up against a wall. And in physiological terms, it's because we actually are. We're trying to force our brain to reshape itself and to get out of an existing rut, an existing pathway. We're trying to form a new habit, a new discipline. And that's one of the reasons they say it takes so much time through repetition, through regular consistency to form these new pathways and to maybe break old existing ones. And so the same is true with discipline. That's also, it can be a bit of a like, oh man, so I'm really disciplined in all these bad ways, but it can also be taken as an encouragement because everything I've disciplined myself to do up to this point, I can discipline myself into new paths, into new directions. And so that applies in every aspect, but of course here we're tailoring it towards resource management and towards our finances as well. And I won't read all the rest of these things because we've got a lot to go through on your handouts today. So we'll jump into the introduction at the top of the page here. I also didn't give you as many blanks this week. You're welcome. But starting off with the introduction, and this is a bit of a recap from last week and then also establishing today's starting point. And so we know that often around here at Renovation, we say that when we're planning to go onto a journey, the first thing that we need to know is where we are. And that's what we started with last week. We started with talking about tracking our expenses, understanding what's our current financial condition, what are our necessary expenses, what are our discretionary expenses, and what are the things that we need versus the things that we want, and how does that all start to work together? So it's about tracking, accumulating data that we can then sort, and it can inform our future decision making. So that's the first thing. However, the second thing that we need to know when we're going on a journey is, where do we want to go? Once we have established those two things, our current destination and the desired destination, then we can set about developing a strategy for the route and the vehicle or vehicles we want to take to get there. And just a really small, whatever you want to call it, foretaste of weeks 4, 5, and 6 that are going to be coming up. And some of you are probably familiar with this. In the world of investing, they actually refer to the different things that you can do, whether it's stocks, bonds, real estate, insurance, et cetera. They call these investment vehicles. So I think that's really interesting that this terminology applies as well. So not just is it the route in the vehicle, but that could also mean the vehicles that we're using to drive us to our financial goals as well. However, we're not there yet. So last week was our starting point, and today we get to do what was one of my favorite subjects in the world to talk about, which is vision casting and determining where is it that we want to go. What's the direction that we want to be heading in every aspect of life, but specifically, again, with regards to our resources. And so at the very top of the page, you can see today's title is Dreaming Big and then Starting Small. And spoiler alert, we're going to spend the first portion of today talking about dreaming big and the second half about starting small. So let's take some time to dream big and to define our desired destination. All right, so I do have a couple of bullet points here for you, a couple of blanks, not very many. But that first one where it says dream big, so here's step one, and this is going to be an assignment that you can work on. You might want to start with 30 minutes or an hour. You might want to come back to it every couple of days. You might want to come back to it after a couple of weeks and spend some time thinking about it, but compile a be, have, and do list. So that's your blanks. Compile a be, have, and do list. And then you can see the 2 bullet points we've added on there is continue to add to your list and build it out over time as you think of more things. And then also consider adding some smaller things to the list in addition to big things. And this is an exercise I've done for quite a few years. I will admit that it's been a few years, so I need to update the list again. I'll probably go through it when you guys are all going through it. But it's interesting to look back on my master be, have, do list over time because I can see what are the things that maybe I've worked towards and achieved, or what are some of the things that have ceased to be priorities in my life and how new ones have come onto the list. So what is a be, have, do list? In really simple terms, you're brainstorming what are all the things in my life that I want to be? The story of my life. What do I want to be? Maybe that's something like a skill. Maybe I want to be a really good musician. I want to be a devoted Christ follower. I want to be financially prudent. So there's a lot of these like identity-based things, like what do I want to be known for? What are skills I want to have? So that's be, have. You can interpret it different ways. I normally think of this in the classical sense of like possessions. So what are all the things I want to have in life? And that could be, I want to have a home. I want to have a healthy family. I want to have a dog and, a vintage 1957 Chevy Bel Air, which happens to be on my list. In case you're wondering why that was so specific. And then what are all the things that you want to do in life? And as we talk about building this list out and then adding to it over time, if you're anything like me, you're going to be like, okay, I've come up with these things. I've managed to whittle it down to a single page for myself, but you may take 2 pages, 4 pages, 10 pages of like, what are all the things I want to do? For me, a lot of the do things happen to be traveling. I want to visit the pyramids in Egypt. I want to visit the Roman Colosseum. I want to travel to these places and have these experiences. I want to do certain things. And so just brainstorming all the things in your life that you want to be or to have or to do. And just a few samples. Some of these can be very massive things, like over the course of my whole life, I hope to achieve this. And some of them can be smaller things that maybe you could do within a current year. So for example, we'll see if I ever do this one, but one of my old ones was, one of the things I wanted to do was visit at least 100 countries in my life and at least 6 of the continents. And in parentheses, I said, sorry, Antarctica. Oh, there you go. You got to be a little bit realistic, right? I don't know if I'll hit that, but that's one of the things that's been on my list. A lot of specific destinations. And then I had some smaller stuff. Like years ago, I was using this old beater laptop that wasn't working. And so one of my goals to have was a new laptop. Now that one I was able to check off the list a few years ago. So I've had to update the list since then, and you won't see it on my most current list. So that's one of your first recommended assignments to do throughout the week, over the next couple of weeks, is just start developing a vision for what is it that you're really hoping to achieve in life? What is do you want from life? What do you want to be known for? You could use a lot of words like, what do I want my legacy to be? What do I want to be? What do I want my impact on the world to be? That could be ministry. That could be, how do I give back? How do I uh, be a good steward of the environment? And the good thing about this list, this is your list. You don't have to share it with anyone. If you want to, you can, but you don't have to share it with anyone. And I'm saying that because I don't want you to feel like, hey, I really want a Ferrari, but I feel guilty about writing that on my list. Don't feel guilty about it. If it's genuinely something that should be on your be have do list, write it in there. You can always go back through and filter things out later. But for now, just start with brainstorming and try as much as you can to not restrict a brainstorming process. All right. Now the next one, and this is really hard, but this is one of my observations, discoveries, opinions about why do so few people seem to really achieve success in their life. Well, this is going to be your next set of blanks here. Define success. Many people fail to succeed at their goals because they have failed to first define what success looks like, thereby heaping upon themselves an impossible task. Many people fail to succeed at their goals because they have failed to define what success looks like, and thereby heaping upon themselves an impossible task. And this is true. This is often when we talk about what's the difference, between a New Year's resolution, like, oh, I want to get in shape. Well, what's that mean? Oh, well, I just want to get in shape. Oh, you may already be a circle. So are you looking for a different shape? Let's narrow this down a little bit more. I didn't mean to offend anybody, sorry. So this next one, this for me, when I went through it the first time, was one of the most difficult exercises of my life because I had to really just free my mind to open up and think big. So this is going to be another assignment that I would suggest and recommend, especially if you've never done it. But write out what it would look like for you, and if it's applicable, your family, to be, number one, financially secure. Number two, financially comfortable. And then number three, financially rich. And what I've discovered is so many people talk about this word rich. Almost nobody ever applies it to themselves, which is strange. And usually the word carries with it some kind of judgment or almost like a condemnation, like, hey, if you're rich, you ought to blah, 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 blah. Well, what? Why? Why don't you do it? It's all about perspective and it's all about context. If you've looked at it on the global scale, and I'm sure everybody's heard this at some point or another, maybe multiple times, but if you look out across I forget what we're up to now, 7 or 8 billion people on planet Earth, the average American / European lands within the top 1, if not 0.5% in terms of wealth globally. So the average person in the world lives on an average of about $1 to $2 a day. So if you look at the global scale, every single one of us here are incredibly rich. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything because our context may be, man, I work with billionaires, I work with CEOs. Okay, my context is different. And so that's one of the reasons that's so important to define what does that look like? And not just what does it mean, because that's not too difficult, but what does that actually look like when you're living it out? If I'm living financially secure, what does that look like on a daily or weekly, a monthly basis? What things can I do? What activities? What opportunities, what things maybe I can't do at that point. When you bump up to being financially comfortable, what new things are added to the possibilities? Like, what now do I have access to do versus what are the things that are maybe still a little bit unattainable? And then lastly, what does it look like for me and my family? How might my life look different? And what would it look like if I felt financially rich? Now, for me, what was fascinating was going through this years ago as I discovered I'm already financially secure because I've checked off everything that was on my list. Being able to meet all my bills on a regular time and having margin in the budget and time and energy. Margin kind of applies to all of our resources. Having the essentials met and having a little bit extra for emergencies, having a little extra to enjoy things in life, to take up hobbies, to do whatever it is. For me to be financially comfortable, well, most of that looked the same. Not really much changed practically. The biggest thing that changed for me was to be able to be a lot more generous, to just have this extra resource available that I can do ministry, that I can give to those who have less, or that I can host. You know, being generous doesn't mean always just giving to the guy on the side of the street with the sign. Being generous can be inviting people over, providing them a meal, providing them an experience, being able to take a day off of work so that you can go and offer your time to help somebody move or to deck the halls for church. You know, so it gives you that flexibility. And by golly, within the last year or two, I think I would have achieved that level as well. So when I was defining what does it look for me to be financially rich, not much changed other than what I'm able to give back and give out for me is what was different. And that's one of the reasons it's so important for each of us to define that for ourselves. And how does that look in life, in living it out? Not just saying, well, I'll be rich if I have $10 million. Well, what's that going to do in your life? What experiences are going to be different? What does that free you up to do? And fill in the blanks from there. And so to me, that's one of the most difficult, but one of the most beneficial exercises that we can do. All right. Now, once you've spent your hours and hours of making a be have do list and then defining success, then we begin to apply filters to everything that we've come up with so far. And here you'll see I didn't give you a whole lot of blanks here. Again, we're trying to cover an ocean of information that's hopefully useful and helpful. So the first one there, filter out any items from your master list that belong to other people. That seems silly to say, but man, Billy Graham was a great evangelist, and he, led so many people to conversions and to new life with Christ, and it was amazing. That's my goal. And then you come to find out that you're not wired like an evangelist, and you actually don't like being in front of people. And maybe your giftings are different, and your skill sets are different. So start to filter through the list and filter things off that are somebody else's goals or lists. Number 2, filter out other people's definitions of success. One person might say, man, when I become the senior VP of marketing at our company, that for me is going to be the end goal. And once again, that may not be at all what you're wired for, what you're interested in. That may not be the direction that you're going. And you might try to get there and then find out that it's hollow and empty because it's not your definition of success. So filter out other people's definitions of success. The third one here, and this one actually does have a couple of blanks. Determine which items from your master list are merely wishes, which are improbable hopes, and finally, which are actionable goals. And I'll give you a spoiler. Those next 3 blanks are those 3 words. So wishes are merely fancies that we are unlikely to even work toward, or that are beyond our ability to influence. And I always think of the, welcome, Sean. I always think of the, what do they call it? The pageant, the Miss America pageant, when they're like, what is it that you want most in the world? Oh, I wish for world peace. Okay, how are you individually going to work towards that? Or is this just beyond your sphere of ability to even influence? Okay, if it's just a wish, filter it off. I wish that I could bench press 9,000 pounds. Probably not going to happen with a human frame. There are certain limitations to what the body can achieve. It can achieve a lot, but there are limitations. Moving on to hopes, which is the second one. Hopes are improbable outcomes or things which rely greatly on the benevolence of others. Now, I wanted to add that second half because we do often speak about hope in the church, and it is definitely a very good thing. So that second half of it, relying greatly on the benevolence of others, that can include God, that can include my boss, that can include somebody down the street, one of my neighbors. It's improbable that it would happen. So this again might be like, I'm assuming that nobody in here is a professional like Formula One racer. So one of your hopes might be like, man, I hope one day I can compete in the Formula One race in Germany. It's like, are you working towards it? Do you have the skills? Do you have the training? Are you moving your life in that direction? If not, then it's probably more of just like somewhere between a wish and a hope. So you can kind of filter some of those off the list too. However, the last one there, goals, are actionable and attainable items, even if the cost is high and the road is long in order to achieve them. Now, some of this is going to take just blue sky thinking, allowing your mind just to go wild, to use the expression to go ham, and to say like, okay, what if one day I did get to where I had, millions of dollars in the bank that I could direct those funds to whatever. And I see a realistic road to get there through particular savings, through particular investments, compounding interest. Okay, maybe it's going to take 5, 10, 20, 40 years to get to whatever that spot is. But on the journey there, and especially once you've arrived, you might say, man, if I did have 40 million in the bank, I could feed 1 million people for a year as one of my long-term goals, one of my life's ambitions. So be willing to think big, but again, try to filter it and consider what is actually attainable through measurable action steps. And some of those could be small, like buying a new laptop. All right, page 2. Thank you, sir. Jesse is my timekeeper today because we don't have our big red clock in the back. Much appreciated. That's right. I've heard of worse promotions. All right, so the front, we talked about dreaming big. Now, the back page, we're going to start talking about starting small. What can we start doing today or this week or this month and definitely this year to start moving in the direction of our goals? I love, a few years ago, I listened to a sermon from Pastor Louis Giglio, and he was talking about 1-year goals versus 10-year goals. And of course, you could use any measure of time, smaller, larger. But he said a lot of the goals that we're aiming for can't be reached in 1 year. He says, but almost any goal that we set our minds to can be accomplished in 10 years. And I just thought that was such a great refresher, such a good reminder to say, hey, it might have taken me 4, 5, 6, 7 years of college to get massively in debt. You may not pay that off in a year, but could you pay it off in 10 years? Probably. It's very doable. So starting to train ourselves to think incrementally, and to me, it's really freeing to think of, okay, what seems unattainable in the short term, if I start doing projections and hey, even if I just did X amount per year, oh, wow, after 5 years, that could all be paid off, or this or that could be achieved. So that's what we're doing with starting small. We're starting to think about what can we start doing right now. So step 1, identify your current resources. We started doing that last week with tracking expenses, but also beyond just your expenses, start tracking or thinking about, what do I have currently with regards to my time? Do I have 40 hours of free time in a week? Do I have 2 hours of free time in a week? Do I have 100 hours of free time in a week? Start just tracking what resources you have available that aren't already committed or already being expended on a regular basis. Also considering things that you currently possess. I currently have a car. I currently have a house. I currently have, a chihuahua or whatever it is. And you don't have to necessarily write all these down, but the idea is to take inventory and stock of what we have, uh, because there's a very good probability that what we currently have is going to be what is the most reasonable starting point for us to move in the direction we want to go. And you'll see right there, I was going to read it, but it's kind of a long passage, so I just put in Exodus chapter 4. And this is when Moses goes and he's speaking with God in the burning bush up on Mount Sinai. And he's having this whole thing. God's like, Moses, you're going to be my guy that's going to go and be the spokesperson to Pharaoh and the spokesperson to the Israelites. And you're going to be the one that tells them what I tell you to say. And ultimately, you're going to be kind of the figurehead to see this great deliverance, this great exodus out of Egypt. And Moses, of course, the whole time is like, pick somebody else. I'm not qualified. I don't speak well. I'm a former murderer. I'm a sheep herder. I basically gave up on my family name and inheritance. And God's just like, nope, I want you. And so finally Moses is like, okay, sure. But what if the people ask me for a sign? Like, what do I do? How do we know that you're the man of God? After all, we haven't seen heads or tail of you in over 40 years. And last time we did, you killed somebody. You picture Moses was really a guy that was really good at positive self-talk. Not at all. And God is basically, he's like, okay, Moses, what do you have in your hand? And he realizes that he's holding this shepherd's staff. It's like, oh. And he holds it up. And of course, how often does that show up in the Exodus? And how often does that show up throughout the Torah of God using Moses and his shepherd's staff to bring about great deliverance and wondrous miracles and things that would be far beyond everything that Moses could ever ask, hope, or imagine. And yet it all started with what was in his hand. In the same way, we're starting to ask ourselves, what's in my hand currently? Because that might be the instrument, the tool to propel me into a new and wondrous future. Also, a couple of verses from Proverbs. And if anybody's feeling up for it, anybody got their Bible available? I'm always happy to read out loud to you, but if anybody wants to contribute, I'm happy to give you a couple of verses to look up. I like it. What do you have in your hand? Hey! Every translation that's known to man. Well, let's have you look up Proverbs 12, verse 11. And then I'll go ahead and read the one after that, which is chapter 28, verses 19 and 20. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A city is built up by the blessing of the upright, but it is torn down by the mouth.
That doesn't sound like.
That's 11, sorry.
Oh. I'm like, that sounds a little different than what I was expecting. Yeah.
Okay. The one who works his land will have plenty of food, but whoever chases fantasies lacks sense.
That's good. Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, and whoever pursues fantasies, what was the last word? Lacks sense.
In the message, it says the witless chase whims and fancies.
The witless will chase whims and fancies. From the message, that's pretty direct, isn't it? But he who tills his land, starting with what's in our hand. And then again in chapter 28, verses 19 and 20, he who tills his land will have plenty of food, but he who follows empty pursuits will have poverty and plenty, abundant poverty. A faithful man will abound in blessings, but he who makes haste to be rich will not go unpunished. Starting where we are, considering what we have in our hands. And in my own personal story and in the majority of stories that I've had the privilege to be a part of, there's been a whole lot of that folly. A lot of chasing after whimsies, chasing impossible gains. I could be the one exception that wins the lottery. Nope. In case you're wondering how that turned out. I didn't play it much. and practice. Yep. How true that is. So that's step one, is start identifying our current resources and our starting point. Step two, to establish and then analyze our goals. So we do have, this is most of your blanks in the whole thing, and this is in this one section. So the first one is write down each goal. And this is so beneficial. I think I've heard this from, I don't even know how many different sources. They say to simply think a goal does almost nothing. To speak it out loud actually starts to do something, but then when you write it down and speak it out loud, it begins to cement itself in your brain through these different sources. You're taking it in auditorily, you're taking it in tactically. You're thinking about it not just in your abstract mind, but also in your concrete logical mind as well. So you're encouraging both parts of your brain to work in harmony towards making this goal a reality, making it a concrete idea rather than an abstract wish. Number two, list the benefits of reaching each goal. Now, this one is important because a lot of the times we just put a goal and we don't really think about how it changes our life. And if we don't have any tangible benefit to look forward to, the goal itself loses most of its power. So for me to say, hey, I want to be in good shape, well, that's not a goal, that's a wish, it's too arbitrary. If I say, okay, I want to establish a regular routine of hiking at least twice a week and exercising at home 3 times a week. Well, that might be a good goal. It's measurable, it's observable. But then what is the benefit of that? Well, fortunately, like many people, I've had the blessing of going in and out of regular fitness routines a number of times in my life. And in general, what I've noticed is when I'm regular in my commitment to fitness, I generally have more energy. My joints don't hurt as much. I feel better and more clear in my mind as I move about the day. Versus those seasons where I've been out of a regular routine, I feel more sluggish in the mind. I tend to notice like muscle and bone atrophy. It's like, oh, I'm waking up and it hurts to stand. So not just having the goal, but thinking about what's a positive outcome or effect of achieving this goal. Number 3, list the obstacles to each goal. If you're trying to start a new goal, a new habit, discipline that you've never done before, a very obvious obstacle is going to be inertia. I've never done this before. My life has been going that way, and I'm really trying to force it this way. That could be a very easy one to add onto your list, is just straight up inertia. There may be certain ones if you said, hey, some of my goals include being promoted in the workplace, having more influence over certain situations and outcomes. Some of your obstacles might be certain criteria that you would have to have, whether that's skills or credentials, to be considered for a promotion in that field. So, and go through it, each list. Yours may be work related, it could be finance related, it could be vehicle related, it could be relationship related. But writing out the obstacles that you can think of to each goal. That's another reason that a lot of people fail to achieve their goals, is they don't consider ahead of time the cost, what they're likely to encounter as opposition. And then when they hit it, they're like, wait, I didn't sign up for this. Or, oh, it just overwhelmed me like a tsunami. Well, okay, I'm back to 8 paces before where I started. When you list out the obstacles, you reduce a lot of their power. And it's the same thing with your goals. You want to list out the obstacles, you want to write it down, you want to speak it out loud. And so your mind can start to fathom these as real possibilities. And when they do inevitably occur, all of a sudden you have so much more power to persevere through it. There's a speaker at the Global Leadership Summit several years ago who grew up in Africa, and now he's in America, and he runs some company. I can't remember all the specifics. But he was telling this proverb. His father was one of the clan elders, but they still do clan elders in parts of Africa. I thought that was pretty cool. And the speaker's name was Shola, and he was relaying some tales, some woes about how hard life is and these obstacles that he faces. And his father, he says, Shola, listen to me. Be the buffalo and not the cow. Which was hilarious. I'm like, what does that mean? And then they go on to explain, they say, when a big storm wall is coming through the savannah, the cows turn and try to run away from it. But what happens is they wind up being stuck in the storm a whole lot longer and a lot more miserable, losing any ground they had made up to that point. The buffalo, by exchange, hunkers down and starts trudging forward to go through the storm, consequently getting through it that much faster. Be the buffalo, not the cow. When we acknowledge and list out the obstacles to each goal, we're effectively framing our mindset to be like a buffalo. This is going to happen. How can I prepare myself for when it does? Rather than like, why is life so unfair, so hard, I'm being rained upon, and I'm a lowly cow. Number 4, identify the skills/knowledge required to reach each goal. Identify the skills/knowledge required to reach each goal. Some of the things that you might want to achieve in life, you may currently not have any idea what it takes to achieve these. Say maybe one of your passions in life is to be a part of clean water initiatives around the world and going into places where they don't have clean drinking water accessible, and people are spending their entire day going to a creek 20 miles away to bring back water for the next day. And you say, I want to be a part of the solution to make sure that every person on earth has access to clean drinking water. Well, what does it take to be able to help in that regard? One, you have to define what would your role look like. Are you going to be the one that's financially supporting that? Or are you going to be the one that's offering your time and your resources, your energy to actually go and dig deep wells and install the plumbing? Well, maybe if you want to do that, you're going to need to learn some of the basics of how deep wells and plumbing function. So listing out what are the skills and resources it might take to achieve each goal. Sorry, skills and knowledge. Number 5, no blank for you this time. List the individuals, groups, and organizations that can help you to reach your goal. One of your goals may be to, or one of your hopes, we'll say, might be to become a better public speaker. And one of your goals might be, okay, I want to give 5 public speeches this year, and I want them to be progressively better, to improve each time. Well, what's one of the organizations that might help with that? Toastmasters, exactly. I'll set up a nice softball lob here. Same is true if this one's a little bit more esoteric, but if you said, one of my goals is to start reading and researching and coming to understand and develop my knowledge and understanding of finance management and investing, well, who are some of the people that, or some of the resources that might help you achieve that? Well, are there perhaps online libraries of information that could start moving you in that direction? Are there groups of people that are similarly wired, or maybe who have already achieved some of the things that you're hoping to achieve in these capacities? And so making out a list of what each of these might be, or who these might be, and then later on, well, we'll just move straight on to number, I think that's 6. And this is another blank. Develop an action plan and set objective milestones. Okay, so you've written down goals. You've listed the benefits of reaching the goals. You've listed the obstacles for reaching goals. You've identified skills and knowledge and individuals and groups and organizations that can help you reach the goal. Now it's time to take all that information and build an action plan. Now that I have these resources, what am I going to do today? How can I start moving in that direction using these resources? Maybe some of your early goals are, okay, now that I know of certain online resources or of certain people or certain organizations that can help me gain information and develop new skills to move in this direction, well, maybe step 1 of your action plan is to spend 15 minutes a day reading in an online forum, or to spend an hour a week looking up an organization to see if you can become a part of it. What would that look like? And so you're making actionable steps. You're starting small. You've dreamed big already, but now you're starting small. What's something I can do today or this week or this month to start taking? My mom's here now, and so I'm thinking of I think it's one of her favorite movies, but we're taking baby steps.
Oh, yeah.
What's that one called? Oh, what about Bob? That's what it's called. Yes.
So, there are things called we use this in counseling and in life coaching, SMART goals.
Smart goals.
Yeah, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, time-oriented.
Oh, I like that. That's really good. So say it slowly again, and I'll repeat it for the folks that are listening in. Specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-oriented. Smart goals. That's a beautiful filter. And that's
Yeah, that's exactly what you're saying.
Mhm.
An action plan,
Yeah.
right? An objective. That's how all this works. One more time. One more time. Specific, measurable,
actionable,
actionable,
realistic.
realistic, time-oriented.
Time-oriented. That's right.
So, what kind of, it has to be specific, and you already talked about it
Yeah.
at the beginning. How do you measure that you met it?
Right.
Right?
Mhm.
And then actionable, what is it that I'm going to do to get to that?
Yeah.
And then realistic, is it realistic that I can lose 40 pounds at the end of the month?
Is it a goal or is it a mere wish or hope?
Right. And then time-oriented, setting a specific
Yeah.
date, I'm going to have this done.
Right. And that does something different too. When you have a deadline or a time frame in mind, all of a sudden you either have to make a decision one direction or another. You can say, okay, I'm just not going to move towards that goal because it's too much pressure. Or you're going to say, okay, I can't put this off. I can't procrastinate. I have to start moving now if I want to achieve this by such and such time frame. That's very, very good. Objective, by the way, for anybody that's kind of wanting a little explanation on that, we talk about it. It's a term of logic. There's things that are objective versus things that are subjective. Subject means it's kind of relative to your own perspective. You can make it to mean different things. Objective is you're not twisting that to mean something else. So, for example, I might say a subjective example is I kind of want to be in shape and a little bit thinner. Well, okay, what's that really mean? If I lost 2 pounds this year, I succeeded, I guess. If objective is I want to lose 15 pounds and be more toned by July 15th. Okay, now you've got a deadline that's objective. You've got a definition, an explanation of what the goal is that's also objective. And so that's just a quick bonus. And it's realistic, exactly. Objective makes it more realistic. And then number 7, accountability. I just wrote down in there in parentheses, give up goals versus go up goals. This was something I stole, borrowed with full credit to Zig Ziglar. And he talked about when you're setting these goals, a lot of the times it's going to be a very invigorating process. You're going to be really getting excited about it, especially as you go through the steps that we've addressed so far and you realize that these are going to be very attainable. They're no longer just these like lofty, impossible, abstract ideals. These are actually doable. And you're going to start building excitement and momentum, and you're going to want to start telling people about it. And in one sense, that's good because accountability is one of the things that helps us stay on track with our action plan. He says, however, consider it this way. If one of your goals is a give up goal, hey, I want to give up smoking this year. I want to give up codependent relationships this year. I want to give up maybe a negative habit this year. Share those with everybody. Because anybody that sees you starting to puff a cigarette or sees you going back into negative cycles of, codependent relationships, they're going to say, hold up. You wanted me to help you stay accountable to moving in this direction this year. Share your give up goals with everybody. Go up goals, on the other hand, his suggestion is to be very selective with who you share those with. Make sure it's those people that care the most about you and that want to see you succeed. And I'll use a simple workplace example. If you and Tom and Jerry are all, the 3 of you are in the runnings for this promotion, and you're like, guys, I've got this goal, I'm going to get this promotion, and you're going to work for me, it's going to be so great. Well, Tom and Jerry are not going to be rooting for you. They might be trying to sabotage you. And if you do succeed, they're going to probably be a little resentful. Well, don't share it with them because all they're going to do is work in opposition. They're going to become a new obstacle to the direction that you're trying to go. Share that maybe with your spouse, with your family, with the deep friends, the fans, those intimate relationships, the people that, as Pastor Kurt says, the people that love you but that aren't impressed by you. Share it with them because they're going to be the ones that help fuel and propel you in that direction and maintain that accountability. But be careful with who you share your go-up goals with.
Somebody should have told Joseph that. Brad to his brothers.
True story. Yeah, I'm going to be, God's going to use me. You guys are all going to be bowing down. It's going to be great. And they're like, into the pit you go. Hey, look, some, in you go. Very well could have. Well, so God was able to redeem it. Who knows if that was the original plan. Step 3, really quick, how we doing? Okay, we still got a few minutes. We may not necessarily have time for Q&A this week, but I think we can get through our last 3 steps here. Step 3, commit yourself to working hard. And this is one of probably the most straightforward, one of the ones that we would all expect. Yeah, if you want to succeed at your goals, you got to be willing to work hard. So it's not a surprise, and yet it's amazing how often we don't achieve things that we want to, because if you really boiled it down and thought about it, it's because it's just too hard. And maybe that's not a high enough priority for our energy and our attention and our resources, at least right now. Whereas maybe these over here are. And so when you've got your goal and when you know it's the direction you want to go, commit to working hard. I love, we were talking about this the other day. It wasn't really originally in the outline, but it's very applicable. There's another guy, another speaker, talker, author, Brian Tracy, who is a phenomenal resource. He is secular. So if you listen to him, you may hear a few crass words slip out time to time. But what I actually love about him, he resonates with me a lot. My top spiritual gifts are prophecy, teaching, and administration. And what you'll notice is not in the top 3 is pastoral, shepherding. It's not feel good, like empathy. It's basically like prophecy in so many words is basically just thus says the Lord. So most of the time that's what is God revealed in Scripture and communicating that once in a very great while, very uncommon. It might be a special revelation and so forth. But basically, Brian Tracy resonates with me because he kind of just says stuff how it is, and he doesn't necessarily care if it rubs people the wrong way. And so one example he uses, he says, what's one of the things that separates people from the people who are successful versus the people who are unsuccessful? He says, well, it's simple. The people who are successful have made a habit of doing the things that the unsuccessful people don't want to do. And he's like, well, what are those things? Well, it turns out it's the same things that the successful people don't want to do either, but they make themselves do it anyway. Being willing to work hard, moving towards our goals. Good old Solly, aka Solomon, also had a few useful things to say on this subject, and I'll do a few of these kind of in a rapid fire order, starting with Proverbs 13:11, where he says, he who tills his land will have plenty of bread, but he who pursues worthless things lacks sense. Well, that's familiar. We just read it. 14:4, oh, sorry, I was the wrong one. He actually says, wealth obtained by fraud dwindles, but the one who gathers by labor increases it. Again, in 14:4, he says, where there's no oxen, the manger is clean. But much revenue comes with the strength of the ox. Sometimes the work you're going to do is going to feel like shoveling ox dung. Can I get an amen? But man, how much profit comes from the strength of the ox, from being willing to do that hard work. Again, over in chapter 16, verse 8, and he says, better is a little with righteousness than great income with injustice. Better is a little with righteousness than great income with injustice. And then again, so I put in parentheses, legitimate work versus sluggard fantasies. Again, a couple of these I have memorized. That's useful. Proverbs 22:29 says, do you see a man skilled in his work? He's going to stand before kings and not just mere men. That is hilarious. Mere men. But also, yours is probably true as well. That is one of the most hilarious things I've heard. Ecclesiastes 11:6. This again is Solomon, and he says, "Sow your seed in the morning, and don't be idle in the evening. For you do not know whether morning or evening sowing will succeed, or whether both alike will be profitable." There's going to be times when we feel like working on it, and we're going to hit that opposition. Our commitment to working hard is going to be one of the things that can help us overcome these obstacles and continue sowing the seed, because we don't know which one necessarily is going to be the one that's profitable. Keep sowing, keep trucking along, keep being disciplined, keep moving in that direction willfully and intentionally. And man, just through sheer repetitions, success is all but guaranteed. And lastly, this one I'm going to paraphrase because it'll take me a minute to turn to Colossians 3:23. Colossians 3:23. Easy for me to say. And in a paraphrase, Paul is writing to the church of Colossae, and he says, "Work as though you're working for the Lord." We always are. That's 100% right. Well, if you know that you're working for the Lord, you want to just be kind of like trying to get away with the bare minimum? Do you want to be like slacking off around the corner, laying down in the shadow? Or do you want to be the one that's out there diligently moving forward his kingdom, as well as moving towards our goals as well? Commit ourselves to working hard. Step number 4, increase your capacity and commit to the long term. All right, I've got another exercise for you to do. We're giving you a lot of exercises today, but sorry, if you implement them, I've found them to all be very profitable and honestly kind of life-changing for myself. So I'm sharing them from that perspective. Hopefully you receive it as a blessing and not bondage. So the next one here is mindstorming. And your assignment is to mindstorm 20 ways to increase your income. That is a surprisingly difficult mental exercise, because I can usually think of about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 pretty quickly, but you can't stop early. You have to force yourself to come up with 20. It actually is. I've done it a few different times, and each time it's taken a lot of thought and a lot of creativity. I don't know about what list you're putting together. They may be. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, refer to Colossians 3:23.
And in the meantime, keep your life balanced, right? Don't be a workaholic.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. And I'll give an example of one of the year's 20 things that I came up with. I've done it a few different years. A few of the things have changed. A lot of them have been very similar, because there's only so many things you can brainstorm that are that different, that are actually within the realm of realistic. So one of the ones I had was, well, I work in a pool and landscape design company. It's a commission-based position. If I design and sell more, I get more income. So one of mine was sell more projects. Second one is I'm a part of a Forex trading community that allows me to trade other people's money and then to share in the profits of it. It's called apiary fund, so I just put in apiary fund income. A third option would be to own rental properties and have income from that. Another one would be income from stocks or options. Number 5 would be to play musical gigs on bass or another instrument. Number 6, start a business. Number 7, win video game tournaments. Hey, make your own mindstorming list. Some of these will be different. 8, flip properties. 9, sell gear or current possessions. Number 10, teach music lessons. 11, take speaking engagements. 12, start a Twitch or a YouTube stream. Number 13, offer advertising on my blog or podcast. I've not done that, but I could. 14, work a second job. 15, offer freelance drafting. 16, do yard work or chores for hire. I had to kind of go back into like my kid mode thinking as a kid, I would do like our landscape company would go and mow somebody's lawn for $5. Yeah, that's like 8 times what I got for allowance. It was an earlier, time in history. Number 17, sell artwork or music. 18, record an album and publish it. So that kind of ties in. Number 19, publish or sell books. And number 20, buy a franchise or business.
Do like I do, find stuff in the garbage and sell it on offer.
That is 100%. That is a wonderful example. Well, I refer you back to Exodus 4. I refer you back to Exodus 4 when God says, what's in your hand? So start with what's in your hand. It's going to take some blue sky thinking, and like out of that list, there's probably 15 of them that I would never do just because I don't think they're good uses of my time over other things. But to just go through the exercise of encouraging your brain to think bigger, to expand. And I'll notice that creativity that you're almost forcing begins to show up in other capacities as well. And maybe in your workplace, you're like, oh, wow, I just had this idea, this breakthrough that nobody could have. Or in my personal life, whatever it is. So forcing creativity in some cases starts to build that muscle, if you will, and increases our capacity as well. And then the second bullet point, analyzing potential gains against potential losses in the long term. What is your time worth? For me, that was why I weeded a lot of the things off my mindstorming list. Is it worth it for me to go out and mow somebody's yard for $15? How long is it going to take? What does that prevent me from doing with my time? Things that in my case are probably higher value. And then you can start weeding those things off the list. And there might be one where you say, well, what if I was to commit another 5 hours a week into my occupation, my profession? And whether that was specifically finishing tasks, maybe that's reading about information that's relevant to your field, increasing your skills, and becoming a person that is higher value to your employer as well. So there's a lot of weighing out potential losses, potential gains, and assessing that against the value of your time. And finally, step number 5, we're actually going to finish on time. I'm very impressed, a little surprised. Analyze the data and adjust course as needed. We kind of talked about that a little bit last week with tracking expenses and starting to put the outline of a budget together. When you're starting out with it, especially if you've never done a lot of these things before, it's going to be a lot of trial and error. There's going to be things where you say, well, I think this is realistic. I think this is an action plan with realistic milestones and attainable end results. And you might work on it for a whole year and realize, I was working really hard on that and I got about halfway. Adjust course. Maybe the next year you try to do about the same, or a little bit less, or a little bit more. So it's okay to adjust your plan as you go. Once you've written it down, doesn't mean that you're stuck with it. So use it as a helpful resource again, rather than bondage. So analyzing and adjusting course, ask a few questions, and there are a couple of blanks here for you. The first one's really short. It is, what is working? You're going to find out that there's things that you're doing that you've been experimenting with that they just hit, they just work. You get into this rhythm and it's like, wow, okay, let's keep that up. Second one, what is not working? Okay, I was going to try to run up South Mountain 5 days a week, and I did it once and I almost died. And I discovered that I hate running. Okay, maybe that's not working. Let's come up with an alternate plan. That's right, because you learned. That's a great way of thinking about it. Use it as a learning experience, absolutely. Number 3, how can you tailor your budget based on real information? And again, we're mostly speaking about finance, but you can apply that to your time budget, relationships, talents, other resources. The next one, are there any goals that have been completed and can be checked off your list? You might be saying, man, I want to work on this bathroom remodel. I should have used a different one that's probably not touching on a sore spot. I want to complete this bathroom remodel, and you work towards it for a couple of years to save up, and then you get it done. You might be able to check that one off the list. The next one is, are there any goals that shouldn't be on your list? and which you should remove. And that could be for any number of reasons. It could be it's not your goal in the first place, it's somebody else's goal, and you just felt like it was the right thing to do to put it on your list, but it doesn't speak to how you're wired. It doesn't move in the direction that you're wanting to move. Well, yeah, to be a regional salesman, sales manager is not at all what I want to do. So why am I moving in that direction? Let's take that off the list and replace it with something that's more apropos to me. And then the next one, is there any goals that should be added to your list, even if that means replacing others? And again, this is something that as you're going through and you're reflecting and you're analyzing data and you're doing your course corrections, you're going to find and say, wow, I have a new passion that maybe wasn't there 5 years ago, but now I feel like it's something maybe God wants me to do. Maybe it's something that I started taking an art class as a hobby, and all of a sudden I realized this like blossoming passion for it. And maybe this is what I need to put more time into. I need to work on developing my artistry skills, developing this, being able to use it as a blessing or as a means of income. So are there any goals that should be added to your list, even if it means replacing others? All right, so we've covered about 5,000 hours worth of information in 1 hour. If it felt like a lot, it's because it is. But hopefully these tools and resources are going to be beneficial to you in establishing and beginning to craft a budget and beginning to think about the direction that we want to go, understanding that within the context of where we are currently, and then preparing ourselves to step forward in weeks 4, 5, and 6 when we start talking about the route and the vehicle or vehicles that are going to help to get us in that direction. Well, Mom, since we have the pleasure of having you here, would you mind closing us in a word of prayer?